Greatsword. One of the most fun weapons that FromSoft created. Luckily it shows up in a lot of their games. In this video I will rank the various iterations across several factors, like availability, size, movement, speed, bonk, and evasion. I can't record Demon Souls gameplay, so I will cover the Dark Souls trilogy and Elden Ring. DS1 describes it as a gigantic greatsword that's too heavy for most people, but compared to the other games it really does not look all that large. DS2 understood that some people just want to swing a massive weapon around. They made it look so much bigger and heavier. This is really a beast of a sword. DS3 understood this as well, and gave us a greatsword that looks even a bit longer. It looks powerful. In Elden Ring it feels a bit smaller to me. I would rank it below DS3 and a bit larger than DS2. DS1 failed the assignment, but the others all have respectable sizes. To me, the greatsword represents Guts from Berserk cosplay, so one of the factors I will cover is how early you can get it. In DS1, it is usually a mid-game weapon, as the earliest you can get it is a low drop rate on a non-respawning Baronite Knight in the Undead Parish. The other two do respawn, but are found later in the game, at a point where you will have access to guaranteed ones. In Sen's Fortress, you can buy one for the hefty sum of 8,000 souls. The easiest one to get is in Einer Londo, so halfway through the game, and just in time for Ornstein and Smaug. In DS2 it is available much earlier. One can be obtained after defeating the Dragon Rider, who really is not much of a hurdle. Getting to No Man's Wharf really does not take long. The greatsword is in a chest in the upper floor of the room with the Dark Dweller enemies, those spider monkeys that are afraid of fire. Another one that can be accessed early is sold by Vengarl. By farming souls to buy a fragrant branch you can get it without even fighting a single boss, which is great for themed runs. In DS3 it can be found in the Farron Keep, which means that at a minimum you will have fought against Udex Gundr and Vort. You get it just in time for the Abyss Watchers, so that's nice. In Elden Ring it can also be found without having to fight any boss, so Elden Ring wins this round in my opinion as it has the lowest requirements before you get access to it. Another loss for DS1, with DS2 again being in second place. One caveat for this chapter is that I will only look at the two-handed moveset, as I feel like this is the only realistic way of swinging around such a gigantic weapon. It's pretty basic in DS1. R2 is just 2 stabs, and the character also does not duck much. L1 and L2 are both a block. Many people do not know it, but DS1 does have backstep iframes. It's only 4 iframes, so they are hard to utilize them. The jumping distance feels pretty low. In DS2 the animations feel heavier and in the combos the attack animations flow nicely into each other. In DS2 backstepping is a lot more viable, as you will have 7 iframes at 100 agility. L2 is a parry. It is hard to time as it only has very few active parry frames, but a lot of startup frames. These parries feel very rewarding to pull off. Jump attacks seem to cover more distance, but rolling out of attacks is noticeable slower than in the other games. DS3 uses similar movesets and animations as DS2, but they feel even heavier. I like this rolling attack more than the stab in DS1 and 2. And most importantly, DS3 has weapon arts. The stomp is great, because you duck very fast and it staggers well. But the jump attack is shorter again. To me, the basic R1 and R2 moveset in Elden Ring feels like a downgrade compared to DS3. A dedicated jump button and 2 different jumping attacks is a great feature. The rolling attack is again a stab. With the Ash of War system, you've got so much choice of what your L2 does. Poor DS1, and another win for DS3. Speed could have been part of movement, but I think it's important enough to be its own category. I think a good comparison is how long it takes from the start of the attack animation until damage occurs. Unsurprisingly, Elden Ring has the fastest R1, but DS2 has surprisingly fast attacks, especially on the R2. I have to give this round to DS2, as relative to the game's speed it is the fastest iteration of this weapon. DS1 has the smallest, but also slowest greatsword. This is a highly subjective category, as it's all just about how satisfying it feels to swing this massive weapon around. This includes the sound the attacks make, and how enemies get flattened or thrown away. In DS1 the attacks do not have much impact on the enemies. Sure, it staggers enemies easily, but it lacks the bonk that the other iterations have. Jump attacks can flatten enemies, but that's about it. In DS2, it feels so much more satisfying that the heavy attacks throw away enemies. This also makes it so much easier to deal with invaders. And if the heavy attacks do not throw away an enemy, they might just break their stance so hard in one swing that you can do a critical attack. In DS2, weapons in the Ultra Greatsword category have this underutilized mechanic. This works with R2 and running attacks, and just feels so satisfying. It's also amazing how this weapon has access to both parry criticals and stance break criticals. Just look at that animation. So painful. In DS3 it feels very satisfying to hit enemies with a fully charged R2, as it sends them flying a good distance. The attacks have good stagger potential, but I'm missing how powerful running and jumping attacks felt in DS2. The power of this weapon feels very satisfying in Elden Ring. You can again break the stance of enemies, but this time it is a general feature of the game and not a special mechanic of the weapon class. I will grant this round to DS2, as the bonk of that greatsword just feels the most satisfying and useful to me. Evasion, the factor that really sets this weapon type apart from others. DS1 really does not have a lot of attacks that I can reliably dodge by ducking below them. You saw a few throughout the video, but in general this game has the lowest ducking potential. One problem is that the enemies aren't yet as large as in the later games. So there are just less horizontal attacks that happen at face level that you could duck below. DS2 on the other hand really seems to have considered this aspect of the weapon. Enemies are generally larger, the attacks duck further down, and it's just easier for me to discover consistent dodges. There's just so many attacks that feel satisfying to duck below, which drastically changes the pace of the combat to a more aggressive and reactive gameplay. Especially with backstep iframes that let you stay directly in the action. DS3 has great ducking potential, and I've already included several satisfying clips in this video, but I feel like the attacks are generally too fast to allow you to consistently react to them, so it feels more luck-based to me than DS2. Elden Ring does have a dedicated jump button, great ducking potential and Ash of War that add even more possibilities, but personally I think that generally the attacks are too fast and the combos too long to use it consistently. I have to give this round to DS2, because it just feels the most satisfying and consistent to me. So, now that I've covered several topics that are important to me and gave an explanation for my ratings, I will sum up all the points to see which Greatsword is the winner. With a total score of 13 points, the DS1 Greatsword unsurprisingly came in last place, mostly due to its small size and lack of impact. It just feels like a larger longsword, but not like an ultra greatsword. Next up is the Greatsword from DS3. It's a great weapon, but at 23 points total it is a bit below the second place. Actually, there is no second place as both Elden Ring and DS2 have a total of 25 points. If I had to choose, I would pick the DS2 Greatsword as the winner, as it just has a special place in my heart. It's an all-around fun weapon with lots of attacks that you can duck below by attacking yourself. But in the end, all of them are amazing,